for the ISB feedback, particularly coming out of the meetings that were held in June. I think for Tom's session, the focus areas will be hearing more from the technology, the audit evidence for updates. But let me not steal your thunder, Tom, and hand over to you to kick us off.
Thanks, Hugo, and great to see everyone. I hope for all of those who are dealing with heat waves that you're suitably cool by now. It's broken a little bit here. So really look forward to this discussion today and the opportunity to speak to you. And so I'll try to keep my remarks pretty brief, assuming that you've read the materials, both the slides and our report. But the big thing to say is that this quarter has been an eventful one where we've made progress on a number of the elements in our critical priority area related to technology. And indeed, all the topics we're talking today touches on our technology focus initiatives. So again, as I said, I assume the materials have been read. What I thought would be a useful thing, if you could flip the slide, is that on each of these four areas, someone could flip the slide, please. That I would give a brief introduction, and then we could pause and welcome comment or input or discussion related to each of them. So like I imagine a few minutes for each, and then open it up, if that's fine with you, Chair. So
That's fine, in order.
Thank you. Okay, if we turn to the next slide, and really returning to our updated technology catalog. And just to give you a little bit of a reminder, is that years ago, we set up a structured approach for identifying and prioritizing technology topics. It was really about building the scanning capacity at our organization. When we approved the technology statement, when we committed to doing more and being proactive about encouraging the use of technology, we added even further structure and transparency to the process. And really, what we're managing is a dynamic catalog, which requires regular board assessment at a minimum every 6 months. In the catalog itself, we provide transparency about the status of specific topics and themes. And that feeds to active projects, but it also feeds into our future consideration of topics that may emerge on our either work program from a standards-headed side, or from a research side, or from a guidance perspective. What we've tried to do here is figure out, as we prioritize, is what we would do if we have greater resource, or we complete topics, or there's emerging demand on it. So what you should know between now and the previous period is that we've tried to categorize topics in a more discernible fashion. A lot of the issues we identified are being addressed through our audit evidence and risk response project, or through our QM project, what we're going to discuss, or the 500 series project. But we're also managing other topics, and we added some new topics to our catalog. On the audit side, we added crypto, we added issues related to cybersecurity threats affecting reporting entities, and on the assurance side, we added AI, assurance of AI, assurance of cybersecurity, and also topics that are technology related, but could also pertain to sustainability assurance. None of these topics, by adding them, mean that we're going to work on them. But it's meant to give a full reflection of what we're hearing in the marketplace, and then feeding into our dynamic assessment on our priorities. And so really, that's where we stand in terms of our catalog. You'll see that we've made some progress in relation to it. There's more detail in the appendix, but I just want to pause there to see if anyone has any comments about our process, about our selection, and just anything in general about our monitoring and prioritization of these areas.
Thanks, Tom. Board members, Dave, I see your hand is up.
Thank you,
Followed
Chair,
by
and
Mark.
thanks, Tom, for those comments. If I heard you correctly, so I'm going to feedback what I think I heard you say, and maybe you could expand on it just a little bit. The identification of these topics doesn't mean that the board has decided they're going to address projects in each of these areas. Maybe you could just say a little bit more about that process, and how will you determine, what and when to work on as a board with respect to these?
Do you want to take Mark's point too?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Maybe just to add to Dave's question as well. I think to just add some flavor in terms of how you're prioritizing or even escalating any issues within the catalog, just to sort of add some flavor to that. Mark.
Yeah, my question was exactly the same. Just just give us some background on how you assign the priorities to these various topics.
Great. So really important point. So Dave, the first thing you said in terms of assumption is no formal commitment is made to doing these topics by just the sheer placement on our catalog. That is the reality. Though we have a hypothesis of what level of priority we're assigning to it. And also the other thing is by its sheer element of being there, it feeds into active projects in areas that maybe the project teams are not fully aware. But as we come up with the prioritization level, it's really on two fronts, both pervasiveness and the urgency of a topic, informed either by research we've done on our own, our discussions with our stakeholder advisory council, our interaction with other groups that are advising us. For example, our technology expert group, but not limited to that. Also, our interactions with former firms, GPPC, regulators, including all of our monitoring group members as well. So that's it. And then it's a collective judgment of the board. So Han was probably heard this at our board meeting itself, is like there's a deep discussion of where we should assign this priority relative to others. We actually moved a couple of the topics down in priorities, some that were at medium down to lower, and some up the scale right now. So in terms of the process that we do is, again, it's a collective judgment of the board that we do it formally every 6 months, again, reflecting those discussions we're having. Clearly, when we have openings or capacity at our board itself, because things have dropped off the agenda, or we've added external help, or we've engaged in something else, then we have to look at these topics along with all the other topics as part of our prioritization process. And that's what I do want to make sense. It's like if other groups are saying we need to deal with questions like materiality, then we're going to have this tension between what on these technology specific topics we have to deal with relative to other audit or other public interest related issues. And this goes a little bit to the prioritization discussions we had last time too. And that's a judgment. And this is a real important discussion that we have with our oversight body about where we get feedback, where we balance the two things. As you know, today, like we did an assessment of where our resources lie. Remember the categories I showed you last time, technology related area. Today we have like 60+% of our resources in technology related areas. We have about 15% in assurance related areas, and the others are related to modernization and other related topics, post implementation reviews. So that's why we get to, okay, where do we shift things and what makes sense? I hope that's helpful and responsive, but happy to take on more on that topic.
Thanks, Tom. Don't see any further hands. Yeah, I think
Okay.
we can continue.
Yes, great. So let's move to the next slide, and thank you very much for whoever's guided me through this. So one of the big areas of focus right now in the areas of work is related to this technology quality management guide series. Remember, we committed to reinforcing the quality management standards that we have and reinforcing those principles through a series of guidance. This was informed by our 8 roundtables, our stakeholder advisory council interactions, our discussions with you, and others. That guidance to apply the principles that are working on ISQM1 and ISA 220 would be the best path forward in the near term as it relates to technology. We've assembled a technology expert group, which has got a broad support, point taken about the desire to find maybe an additional member or two from other regions of the world, but the work is still ongoing while we do that effort. But the reminder here is like, these are the 3 things that we're trying to accomplish by these guides. One is to ensure the consistency of application of QM1 and 220 and their principles to matters related to technology, largely because the technology is being acquired or developed and rolled out at the firm or even network level. Second thing, what we want to do is reduce the risk of regulatory fragmentations in the interpretation of these standards. And thirdly, this is what I call the democratization element. As we work with practitioners and regulators and other stakeholders in the marketplace to get some of the better practices that are out there and spread them out in a consistent manner, so SMPs and others have the benefit of our guidance and best practice, so technology can be shared and used by all. If you think about that's the 3 things we're trying to get at. Turn the slide.
Tom, maybe just pause I see the other Tom's hand is up.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. And Tom, thank you very much for mentioning the expanding the geographical expertise, including some areas, and you are actively trying to find some experts from, for example, the Asian region as well. The one issue I'm a little bit on how can I say, point out is that maybe the large firms may be okay, but as you say, that this project may have some sort of beneficial impact on the SMPs as well. So in that case, that try to find some, for example, the Asian technical experts in this area, not only in the large firms, but try to find some the SMP area, maybe a sort of a challenge. How do you try to reach out to those fields in this and technical experts? Because for example, it may be helpful if you can contact with some JSS or some board members from Asian countries, which may have a sort of in some Asian markets, they have a very independent audit firms out of the not big four firms. So do you have any ideas how to reach out to that SMP market for example, in the Asian audit market? Thank you.
So, Tom, really important point, because you raised jurisdictional standard setters. Remember, the technology expert group isn't the only group we're dealing with helping us with the guidance. We actually have a technology action network, advisory network of jurisdictional standard setters that are part of this, including Asian standard setters and non-European and non-North American ones assisting us in this process. So we do have some of that covered. And just remember about the board, the expert group composition. It turns out the geography is the way it is, but pretty much everyone was appointed by a global body, and the nominee is who they came up with. So, but on the SMP side, just to be clear, we do have good representation from a global perspective. Right now, we have an SMP nominated by the SMPAG from the IFAC world, but we have two service providers, software providers, who predominantly work with SMPs around the world too. So all I'm saying is there's a number of ways we're reaching out to other geographies and SMPs. None of that inhibits us from adding one or maybe two more to the expert group. So they're covered, but I get the idea that we're open for nominations. The only thing is we can't hold the process up, so we're getting input from multiple sources.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide, and this will be really quick. A couple of things I want to add is for those who have a very close eye on what we do, you may remember that we were talking about a 5-guide series going into the board meeting. It's a 4-guide series because we combined the previous guide 2 and guide 3, because the input we got from the expert group and from other outreach was like, you can't separate the topics that are now listed under guide 2. It would be better not to think about things from a pure process perspective, but to separate by service provider and foundational model considerations, and then the firm development and deployment, and that the sort of the subject matters all need to be joined together. That was in guides 2 and 3. So that's where we've gone from 5 to 4. And this is a reflection of how dynamic the input is. Like when we put out the board paper, we had yet to meet with the expert group, and we had yet to discuss it at the board. The other thing I would just want to say is that the expert group and we are meeting regularly. As a whole, it's meeting on a monthly basis. We just had a meeting yesterday that I attended where they reviewed both guides and part 1 of guide 1 and part 1 of guide 2. There also have subgroups of the expert group meeting too with our staff on a regular basis. We're drawing on expertise of regulators and those in practice to sort of help us with the drafting as well. And throughout the process, it's not explicit on this slide, but I want to be clear that we're coordinating with IESBA on ethical considerations. And Jean from the IESBA staff is part of all of these meetings and working closely with our team as well. If you flip the slide, it'll give you a sense of our timelines. Again, a very dynamic process. So I'm not coming down from the mountain with these time dates and outputs etched in stone, but we're trying to give people a sense of when we're coming out with our guides and when we anticipate it. And the hope is that we will continue to refine our roadmap in September and put our guide 1 and guide 2 part 1 for consideration and approval in the marketplace. Now, we know that all these guides have to fit together, but there's such desperate demand for us to get things out so people could see it quickly that we've decided to put things in the marketplace incrementally. It may require us to go back and adjust over time too. And so they're going to be working drafts for the board to review, but subject to revision. And that's one of the benefits of flexibility that we have. But everything that gets published requires full board review in public session, subject to input from all of our board members after taking account of the expert group's advice and feedback. And the hope is that we get to an integrated guide series by June 27. But this once we're done with QM, then it probably leads us to other areas to work on. And so that gives you a sense of where we are on our quality management guides. We're finally putting meat on the bone so people could see what we're intending to do. We got really positive feedback yesterday. There's work to be done on Guide 2, Part 1, but it seems to me that we're heading in the right direction. And I'm happy to solicit comments and feedback.
Thanks, Tom. Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Shago. Yes, Tom, I absolutely get the need to move at pace on this, given the speed of developments in the market. However, I have picked up some concern, perhaps among your board members, that the timetable here maybe doesn't allow sufficient time for your board to conduct a substantive review of these guides before they're published. The feeling perhaps that it's a little bit of a formality that the board is being presented with the draft guides before they're issued. Could you, I guess you're aware of that. Could you perhaps comment on why you believe that there is sufficient time for substantive review of these proposals by your board before they're issued?
So, Mark, I'm surprised that's what you're picking up from some of our board members. I'm meeting with all of our board members one-on-one between the last meeting and the next one. In fact, most of these just one-on-one discussions are happening between now, like last week and the end of this month. And I have not picked up on that. Remember, we all agreed to this timetable in board session, but there is flexibility to move if we don't feel like we're ready on any of these. So that being said, I think this is very similar to what we have for all of our board papers when they come to the meeting. Like, there'll be things posted. We're sharing documents throughout the process. People are able to get input, and it will be very much like board members get at every opportunity. And so I'm not aware of those concerns, but clearly it's an ambitious timetable. If we're not ready, we're not ready, and we'll push back. But with most things, like, you could always take more time, but you always have to marry demand. I feel like we're always worried about us a little bit on 5,000, about moving so quickly as well. And we were able to accomplish it, and I think people felt they had a comment. But if there are real concerns, I'm certainly open to hearing about it, and we'll take the time needed to get something good to the marketplace.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Mark. Any other questions? If not, then we are moving on. Tom?
Great. Thank you, Chair. Could we move to audit evidence and risk response? So this is sort of the biggie right now, to say the least. And what I want to say is that at our June meeting, we approved the exposure draft for revisions of our audit evidence risk response analytical procedure standard and the consequential and conforming amendments that result from those standards. Now, just to step back, and I think we always sometimes get lost in these technical details, and there are a lot of technical details here, that the goal was to address in an integrated manner and in a principle-based manner the continued evolution of the risk-based model. And if you think about it, to date, we've done a lot so far on that, whether it be 315, our risk assessment standard, 600, our group audit standard, 540, that actually on accounting estimate that preceded 315, fraud and going concern. These have been coupled as a result of the requirements related to professional judgment and professional skepticism, coupled with quality management and enhanced auditor reporting. I view this as sort of an integrated and involvement package. And really, to me, the final major pieces of this puzzle are what we're doing on these standards, audit evidence, risk response, 520. That's not to say standard setting ends right there, but this is really the biggest chunks of the audit model. And we know that this will have a big impact on audits and on methodology. And there's a lot to bite off here. So it's a complex project. One of the things we're trying to deal, as the PIOB has noted to us on many occasions, rightly so, is that there needs to be a focus on technology and internal control. This slide sort of tells you how we've tried to address it. The big point that I'd like to make is it's an exposure draft, and at some point, and we've done a huge amount of outreach and consultation to get to this point. We needed to make a decision of when everything is good enough to get comments out. I mean, elicit comments in the process. We also know that there's going to be a high degree of contention on some of the topics. Take the question of paragraph 18 of 330 on material classes of transactions, account balances, and disclosures, where there's big differences of view. We need to get the discussion going and not get paralyzed by it. And I think our approach to consultation will make clear is that we're open-minded on many of these topics, and that we know where we are today won't be where we are in the future. So if you see this slide that we put up, is like our approach is that we know that the hard work is really ahead of us, because we need to draw attention to what the intent of these proposals are and ask people, do they agree with the intent and purpose? And then if you do you agree with how we've executed it on it? And I think you could argue for and against on both sides, because what we're trying to do is complicated. Like, changes in one standards impact the other and flow through. And so we're trying to do the best in the explanatory memorandum to explain what the purpose of these changes are, why we're doing it, and then people could either question the fundamental principle or the execution of it, which is a drafting question. And so, again, we're trying to increase awareness, encourage response, do things to articulate what we've done on both sides, both on the principles and the execution, and then significant targeted outreach during the process, not just waiting for the comment letters to arrive, but to give people an opportunity to give nuanced input throughout the process. So I hope that gives you a sense. The comment period, when we get the exposure draft out, will be about 130 days, if I remember right. It'll effectively go through the end of the year. It still allows us to finish by the end of next year. And I think that would be about right. And then we'll have to consider the implementation period. So I'd welcome input on this and comment.
Thanks, Tom. I think you've generated some real interest, as I see 3 hands are up. Let me start with Han and then go to Felipe and then Tom.
Okay. So first time, a real credit to you and the board on this one, getting the AE and RR package to exposure with the hard issues actually resolved during the week, not punted. And that's not easy, and it showed. So thank you for that. Now that it's out for comment, I'm curious where you personally expect the pushback to land, because from the room in June, couple of spots looked live to me. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just lost the last bit of what you said, Han, where you will.
You guys were trying to push it out, so it was very successful. Thank you for that. But then from my recall that there were little minor issues. So personally, where do you think that the pushback would come?
Okay, Tom, do you want me to continue and take?
Yeah, why don't
Philippe
we
and-
continue
Yeah.
on this?
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Philippe.
Thank you, Chego. Hello, Tom.
I feel it.
Thank you for the presentation, as clear as usual, I would say, Tom. And can you come back to the slide 7, please? Just the previous slide. Thank you. So this project deals with the expectation about control testing. And as you remember, Tom, there are strong expectations about reinforcement of, tests of controls to avoid, notably, purely substantive approach in many circumstances where it appears cost effective. My question about that is that you write, test of controls, when test of control alone is appropriate, circumstances requiring test of controls. So that means that there are circumstances not requiring test of controls, which is my view, and due to the expectations requires a lot of explanation and maybe education. So how are you going to deal and to take into account, this expectation on the market and expressed by the PIOB before about, the fact that the auditor should take care of the quality of the control and, contribute to reinforce, internal controls when it's necessary in terms of financial reporting quality and fraud risk also to be improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom, for presentation. And my question is concerning the relationship with the discussion of the AERR and the 500 series, because what I hear from their June meeting is that the one example is that the discussion around the 505 of the external confirmation, and there is a sort of the split in the board. I heard there is a split in the IWC board. If the external confirmation is for the determine or consider type of discussion, and then I heard that that discussion will bring back to the 330. It means that there might be some sort of the discussion. We have to manage the one discussion on their external confirmation may relate to the interpretation of the 330 discussion, but the timeline may be a little bit different. So is it then the isolated, how can I say, issue? If it's an isolated issue, it may be okay. You can deal with it one by one. But do you expect some sort of that sort of interrelationship between the 500 series discussion and the AERR discussion? So, and if it is not the isolated cases, how do you manage the timeline? Because the ED for the 500 cities will be published at the end of this year. So there might be that 6-month difference for the timeline for the discussion. That's what I would like to ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. The other Tom, over to you, and then I will have 2 more questions when you're done.
Yeah. Well, all really important points. So where do we get pushback on? I don't ever anticipate where they all will be, because sometimes the comment period will expose more. So we'll certainly get a lot of pushback on this because it impacts all areas of the audit. But I think we know that there are topics that have been raised by the regulatory community with some concern, particularly the elimination of paragraph. I wouldn't say elimination, the changing of paragraph 18 of and replacing it with other things related to substandard procedures. In 330, this question of test of controls alone and when that's permitted will get a lot of feedback as well. I think for the profession, we'll have a question of unintended consequences of some of our drafting and how things actually fit together and whether they can be executed. The other area we're hearing is like, okay, you may be writing this from a principle-based record, principle-based manner, but how will regulators then enforce this consistently and making sure that there's some common understanding about that? Is another area. I'll get to Philippe's points specifically later. In fact, one of the areas that we constantly heard from particularly smaller practitioner was whether we were overemphasizing test of controls to the detriment of substantive procedures, and therefore maybe reducing the scalability and proportionality of our standards. And so those are areas I would expect to get a lot of feedback. What we're going to do is take a really close look at the explanatory memorandum, that we draw those points out and acknowledging the differences of viewpoints that we heard throughout the drafting process. And not to assume that we got things right, but to invite comment on the conclusions that we made and then our execution of it. So again, that's what I'm referring to, be open-minded on those topics, and really think this is a real opportunity to discuss the specifics of these standards, but to some extent, how much people believe the risk-based model that we effectively inculcated through 315 and other standards has really taken hold, and how much do we need some backstops to the system. So I hope that responds to your point. Philippe, on the issue of control testing and substandard procedures, I think our focus has been is that you need to do the right response for the right risk and right circumstances. And like, it will differ from time to time, but there's a clear push in the way that we're doing is to do more related to control testing, but not to say that you can take a substantive only approach. Remember, there are many audits that may be appropriate. So like, going back to the point that I just said to Tom, is like, it's a balance. And so the clarity that we're providing hopefully focuses people more on how to do more robust control testing and to do it in circumstances that will provide better audit evidence. We do, and this is an area of some contention, what we think we do is clarify when a test of control only approach is valid. We think the standard itself was already implicit on that. We're making it explicit what's implicit, but we're clearly trying to delineate the circumstances when that may be the case without sort of hardwiring it going forward. So it's really about doing the right things at the right times with an emphasis more on test of controls. Tom, I think your point is very right in terms of the 500 series is very interconnected with these two standards, particularly 330. And, what we're we're able to do is take the benefit of the principles we're agreeing on in this package that we've just approved, and will be out for exposure shortly, and flowing that through. But recognizing that there's a difference in timings of when they'll go out for exposure, we'll have to bring this all together at the back end. And that's where it'll happen. We've done this before with other standards. We don't anticipate the redeliberation process to be as long for the 500 series. And so the tidying up will happen on the back end, that they clearly all have to be interrelated, and the project teams are very coordinated and will share information throughout. So in an ideal world, you'd have it at the same times. Capacity doesn't allow us to do it that way up front. We'll make acknowledgments when we go out for exposure, and we'll tidy up on the back end. But this isn't new for us. We've done this on other initiatives before.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I don't want us to spend too much time, but just two questions extra that I had in mind. On the next slide, Pavel, when we are talking about the targeted groups, I was just curious to understand whether we considered users, the user group, the investor group, and preparers, because I don't see them included in your targeted outreach. Is there a reason why those groups are not visibly included?
Space. No, we should have included them. Space is the only reason. Obviously, we have this user advisory group that we'll use. It's sort of, you could see it a little bit at the bottom here. It says include in representative groups there, and we have the user. Also, we have this academic group. I don't know whether they will be directly desiring to input on it or not, but we have them available. And we'll do targeted outreach to preparers as appropriate through the process.
Okay. I guess that has then answered my second question. That's fine. We can continue.
Yeah. Sorry, PowerPoint, there's restrictions. It's like this balance between over dense, making it too dense and not. If you flip, I guess, the slide 9 now, we'll get to the 500 series. So the first thing I'll say on the 500 series, which is sort of that, if you remember from an action standpoint, what we're doing is targeted modernizations of our standards. We're very much in process yet. We haven't made final decisions. This is a work in progress, but certainly would welcome input on anything, any issues you see arising right now. I put a little bit of the detail of our decisions in the appendix. So it's obviously fair game, but I wanted to focus at a higher level that the idea is to modernize what are relatively old standards to reflect technology, and to really sort of develop consistent practice and behavior about obtaining and evaluating audit evidence about inventory and external confirmation procedures, including issues related to professional skepticism. So this is what it's about. These are the high level objectives of our process here. And nothing is done in isolation. I think this goes to Tom's point. Like, it reflects all the things we've done on 315 and what we're doing on 500 and 330, and everything needs to flow through together. And we're really just sort of beginning the process with the goal of finalizing these exposure drafts in December. And as I viewed our discussion in June, it was really, actually, much of it was about thinking about the interconnections of our other standards to these, and also not overburdening these standards with so much detail about technology specific elements. Now, it's funny. I did gives you a sense of standard setting and what you can do. There has been some commentary from practitioners about, do we need these standards in a world of 315? And our attitude is that we do, based upon the moment. And I don't think this is the right area to have a discussion about the robustness of a risk-based model. These are standards that exist. People are seeking guidance and specificity on this. The regulators view them as valuable standards. What we need to do is modernize them to reflect other changes in our standard setting structure and the use of technology. And I think discussions about the robustness of the risk-based model is much better had in the context of our audit evidence and risk response process rather than these standards themselves. Another element I would say is that we're trying to drive consistency of practice with other standard setting bodies who've already moved in these areas to date. And there have been a few standard setters, such as the UK, I think the Netherlands may have the United States and others who have done work on these standards, and we're looking to them, but we're not beholden to their approach. We're very much trying to remain principles based, understandable, and clear in our requirements and guidance. So that's where we are on the 500 series. Remember, we removed the question of sampling from this. We still will consider whether we need to do guidance. We're working with our jurisdictional standard setters about whether that will be appropriate. But these are the standards related to inventory and external confirmations are our focus right now. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Tom. Han? I think you are still on mute, Han. Can see the lips moving, but no sound.
Oh, okay. Can I come back to the ISA 505 confirmation piece for a second? The question of when a confirmation is required for cash and receivables. As far as I recall, the room looked close to evenly split there. And the way I read it, the split wasn't really about the risk itself. Everyone agrees that that's where the fraud tends to concentrate. Looked more like a question of whether ISA 505 is even the right home for when to confirm trigger, or whether that really belongs in 315 or 330. So I'm curious how you see it resolving. Do you think it's a drafting problem you can fix with wording, or more of a genuine conceptual disagreement that public comment won't really settle? I ask this because those who feel like they call for pretty different next steps. Thank you.
So, Han, I'd be careful about getting too far in front of my board. I could tell you, I was personally concerned about eliminating a requirement in this area. I think the issue of cash and cash equivalents is so vital. It may be one of those things that, regardless of our principle-based approach, that we just mandate. I don't think we've resolved it. I don't think it's a placement issue primarily. I think there's a discussion about whether people believe that it's so important that you have an explicit requirement in these areas or not. I think the majority was leaning towards where I am, but I don't think it's resolved yet. And my guess is that when we reach a conclusion, there'll be differences of views on this topic, and we'll put it out for exposure and gather evidence on it. And, this is one of the things that we've tried to do as a board, is not get hung up on topics when there's a split, but to explain this is where the preponderance of the board's position is and why those who believe it. But there's another position too, and why they believe it, and actually seek public comment on it as well. I think there are legitimate views on both sides. I personally think that the cash element is so important that it's worth putting your thumb on the issue. But others may have a different point of view. And so we'll see how it resolves itself. But I guarantee you, when we go out to exposure, this will be a major topic of conversation. Villy's prompted me right now just to remind me that we're going to put together both options where it's just an application material and where there's a requirement in relation to this. As I said, you know where I sit right now, but I'm 1 out of 16 votes in this process. I've asked you guys to give me a vote that counts for 17, but you've yet to oblige me yet. But certainly welcome to viewpoints. And if this is a public interest matter that you similarly see, like that's sort of where I come, is like there's some things that are so important. And we're going to get a little bit of this on other topics in our 3:30 discussions as well.
Thanks, Tom. Dave?
Tom, maybe I'll just add a little bit to that conversation. Thanks for that explanation. I guess I'm in your camp in terms of this. It just seems pretty straightforward to me. So getting that feedback, what I'll be really interested in is the why. If there's some flexibility that needs to be out there, let's make sure we understand the why before we do that.
Yeah, and I think that's really like when I've spoken, it's not the exact same as the 33018 question, but it has some of the attributes of it. And I think what we're trying to do is elicit a conversation around the why and whether any removal of a requirement is justified based upon the robustness of the risk-based model we're putting in place. And so, I think this is what we're trying to generate. With a sense of humility, it's a call at the end of the day, and not only does our decision have an impact from a conceptual standpoint, there are practical consequences for the way these standards are interpreted and regulated as well, and we'll need to get all perspectives on that.
Thanks, Tom. I don't see anyone's hand up at this stage. Are you done, or you've still got a few slides?
I am done with my slides. The others were appendices to help with some detail if you want some.
Yeah, but maybe just as the last point from your presentation, just to acknowledge that I guess there's some sort of harmonization happening or coordination between your audit evidence piece of work and also this piece of work of the series that you've just both in terms of content and timelines. Maybe just to confirm that, yes, that is what is happening on the ground.
Not only on that, but with our technology team as well. There's always cross collaboration happening. And I think that's one of the things that we've been able to accomplish over recent years is that we're going cross project much better than we used to, because everything has an impact on everything else, and getting our teams to talk together. So the technology scanning this catalog impacts all of these projects. And so when they get to a topic or they're doing their development papers, the project specific teams are working with our technology team. And also our audit evidence and risk response team are working with the 500 teams. And there's some crossover of personnel as well. Remember, people aren't just allocated to one thing.
Yeah. Okay, no, thanks for that confirmation. Thank you so much to you, Willie and team, for that report back. We appreciate it. I guess we'll recircle back when it comes to the coordination project in a bit. At this point, I open the floor for the IESPA team, Gabriela and team, for you to take us through your own update for this meeting. Over to you, Gabriela.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for having Claudia moving the slides. It's very good to see you. Of course, it would be better to see you in person in Madrid, but I guess that it must be so hot that I'm not sure that we could make it work. If you allow me, Chair, I will share this presentation with Ken. And one of the reasons is that Ken has just came back from his holidays, and he must be fresher than I am because I've been melting here in Lisbon. Now, speaking seriously, I think that Ken may always have very good inputs, mostly related to some projects where he's more involved. So if you allow me, we are going to share this presentation and try to be as sharp and short as possible to allow time for the conversation. So if you could move to the next slide, which is the first one, please. So the next slide is something, the next one, please. So this is the agenda. I'm sure that you will have seen it. And I thought it would be useful in light of the conversations that we have been having with the PIOB and our stakeholders as well, to give you an idea about the direction of travel in terms of a strategic planning, strategic prioritization, resources, and etc. This is a very rough and high-level idea of how this is evolving, or this might be evolving. But anyway, and we had a very good discussion with the board in June, a very freestyle one, but we are planning to have a more in-depth discussion in September so that we can be more intentional, disciplined, and effective in terms of planning, prioritization, and these things. I think that Ken is just joining. What you see in this slide, and again, it's a very rough picture of how we see it and how I see it as the chair of the board. What you see at the top is the current or recent status of our strategy and work plan cycle, with some significant number of work streams running in parallel, each competing for the same, of course, finite resources. And that was, of course, in my view, the right starting point, given the scope of the strategy and work plan. But as we moved through the cycle, and as we have been listening to the PIOB, but also stakeholders, the firms, regulators, etc., it is becoming clear that we can be a little bit more structured in order to ensure some discipline while at the same time remaining flexible. So the second half of the slide, the lower part of the slide, shows where we are probably landing for the remainder of this strategy and work plan cycle, with 2 clear priority work streams instead of 8 or 10 or whatever parallel tracks competing for the same resources. Priority 1 is about standard setting and guidance in areas of greatest interconnected risk, transformation, evolution, the so-called burning and hot platforms, farm culture and governance, private equity and technology. These are the areas where we are seeing that the stakes and the pace of change are highest. Priority 2 shifts some weight toward global adoption and implementation, and this is a broad way of saying a lot of things that we are doing and will be doing in this respect. The PIRs that stakeholders are requiring us to do, monitoring of national adoption and implementation support partnerships, you name it. So broadly called adoption and implementation priority. And this reflects very much what we have heard consistently, that standards without adoption and implementation support don't achieve the impact that they are designed to achieve, and that the IESPA needs to give more attention to supporting stakeholders, jurisdictions, and etc. with adoption and implementation. In respect to some of the projects like CFO, CIVs, Part 4B, we are making some explicit and very reasoned calls and decisions. I'm not going to go into the details, and I can explain further afterwards. But the CFO, we are seeing as a possibility that it may be slightly deprioritized, pending some interim conclusions that we need to confirm in September. CIV is clearly low priority these days, and we will put it on hold until we have the capacity to proceed with the committed guidance that we want to develop. Part 4B is closed, is finished since June. And we will continue monitoring through the IMAG following this June 2026 decision. And we'll say a little bit more about that. So this is about intentional resource and prioritization discipline that we are wanting to take, adopt, and put in practice with respect to everything that we are doing. Of course, underpinning all this is our commitment to all this strategic approach to the work, the strategy and work plan, the SMART, the proportional, some work that we are doing on proportionality that I don't know, I'm not sure that the PIOB has seen it, but that we have just recently published to support the small and medium practices mostly. Grounding decisions on a new committee that we formed on the Trends and Risks Committee, and the Insights Group, which is trying to make sure that we see everything at all times and that we can understand where we can be more relevant. So this is not just reshuffling our priorities and our activity, it's really a rationalization to ensure that we have a sharper focus, a clearer sequencing and responsiveness to what we are hearing and from the PIOB to start, and with other stakeholders about where the ISBA's focus, resources, attention, etc., will have the greatest impact. So this is like the context for the conversation that will follow. I don't know, Chair, if you want to stop here or if I can move to the next topic on the agenda.
I see Tom's hand is up. Maybe let's pause and take a few questions.
Thank you very much. And we could talk a little bit later, but the just one question is the current SWP cycle will finish next year. It means that we started to have some sort of think about the transition to the next SWP period, which will start 2028. So is there any expectation for how to smoothly moving to the current SW period to next period? Because for example, when you were mentioning that priority of the priority 2 is a global adoption in implementation, and then it will, I suppose, I imagine that this is very, very important, especially for the ISBA, and then this priority 2 workstream will continue. And so how do you observe the transition to the next SWP period from this diagram? I mean, is it a separation? Of course, we will start to talk about the next SWP period. So we are still in not in a very complete phase, but is there any expectation? How do you smoothly moving out to the next phase, next SWP period? If you have any ideas or thinking, I'm very happy to hear about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Gabriela, Mark's hand is also up. Do you want to take?
Yeah, I can take both. I can take both. Thank you.
All right, Mark.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And hello, Gabriela. Just a couple of points on this this evolution slide. So firstly, the work on CIVs and pension funds has been paused. Now this concerns me because this was on the strategic work plan. You did outreach to stakeholders a year or so ago. There was particular interest in this area from investor groups, i.e. users of financial information. It therefore concerns me that this has just been paused and essentially taken off the strategic work plan, certainly for this cycle. And I'd just like to understand a little bit more about how you actually justify that, given the investor interest. And my second point on this is that we have on here two, to my mind, very related projects: the FCG project and the private equity investment project. Progress on the FCG project appears very slow, and the proposed progress on the PEI project that you deal with in later slides looks very slow too. I wonder, if as part of this review of your priorities, whether you had considered combining those two projects, which are clearly related, and dealing with them in a more expeditious way and on a more timely basis. I'd welcome your thoughts on those two questions. Thanks.
Gabriela, as Mark was finishing, Philippe's hand went up. Should we also allow Philippe to come in?
Yeah, happy to take all of them at the same time.
Okay, Philip.
Yes, thank you. Hello, Gabriela. No, just a very quick comment to stress, the interest of this evolution of strategic thinking, because I was at the last board in New York and I attended the discussion about that. And I think that, it's a very important perspective that you introduced in the agenda, the strategic reconsideration of the priorities in the plan, because due to the evolutions of the environment, and it would make no sense to have a sort of blind execution of a strategic work plan which was designed once and 3 or 4 years later systematically executed without reconsideration. And I remember, the quality of the conversation about this point in a context of limitation of resources. As a result, it's true that all the the changes of priorities, or when you decide to freeze a project and so on, you can always discuss that. But in terms of strategic monitoring, I think this is a very good approach to reconsider, regularly the priority of projects and to make some choices about the priorities, those where you want to really push and accelerate, and those that you can wait. And I think I'm very supportive of this approach, Gabriela.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Philip. Yeah, go ahead, Gabriela.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll probably flip the order of my responses and start with Philip, because it brings me to Mark's questions, and then Tom, if you don't mind, because I think it will flow well. So thank you very much, Philip. I think it's good to know that the conversations that we held at the board resonated with you. I also think, as chair of the board, that this was an extremely important discussion, and that to be continued. As you heard, we even considered considered a possible midterm meeting, but we need to be ready for this time for a more structured conversation. This was like a brainstorm. So in September, we will probably hear more from the board and make more bolder decisions. And that's why also I don't want to put myself ahead of the board decisions too much. This is a little bit my vision based on what we heard. Now, thank you for that. And that, Mark, Philip mentioned choices, and that's exactly what this is about. If you ask me if I like personally, as chair of the ESBA, to pause the CIV's project, no, I don't. This is a project that speaks to my heart. It is until today my conviction that there is a lot there, and I'm even afraid that one day there will be a problem, because we have been repeatedly asked, why are you doing that if there are no problems in the market? And the response has always been, we should not always wait for the scandal or the problem to move ahead. My concern is that if one day, one of these days, there is some problem. People will ask, why haven't you done this? But we need to make choices. And that became very clear to the user more recently, that we can't keep on doing everything at the same time. Even if each one of us or some of us have personal convictions which are not necessarily fully aligned with this, we need to listen and we need to see where stakeholders mostly think that we can be relevant. We couldn't be deaf and not listen to the strong requests regarding, namely, private equity, technology, and the PIRs. And the reality is that we don't have resources for everything. CIVs, it's a very technical area requiring a lot of work. It was very difficult to move this project forward. And to be frank, even if investors had some interest in this project, all in all, there wasn't that strong request, ask, or urgency expressed for us to do something. I personally think that we need to do something, but we need to make choices. And the choices is to make allocate our resources in a way that we respond to the most urgent topics, and the most urgent topics are clearly these ones that you see here, given what we have been hearing and what we have been doing, but also given what you said, Mark, that we are going too slow or a little bit slow on firm culture and governance and private equity. Well, I'm not going to share my thoughts, personal thoughts, but of course, we need to move forward with this, and this also requires a lot of significant technical resources and even support resources that we cannot deploy to every project. So, what we are saying with respect to CIVs is not that we have stopped. This is a little bit for some time in the shelf, waiting for an opportunity, a slot where we can get some people or free up some people in the team and the board to take care of this project. But I will, of course, take away your note, and I'm very happy that you made it, because we cannot consider this project as if it was dead. It is not stopped, and we need to keep it alive in our minds before there is a problem that we have not responded. And Tom, to your question, how do we move from this strategy and work plan to the next one smoothly? I think that the response, you somehow gave the response to it. Well, if you look at the priority to adoption and implementation, I don't believe that this will go away or even diminish over the next many years. I'm not speaking about 1 year. I'm speaking about the future. I think that this will remain and become a standing area of work for the ISBA that we will never get away of it. So this is probably the platform that will take us to the next strategy. We have already started looking to the responses to the survey, and there is a lot of recommendations and suggestions for us to do adoption and implementation. So this is probably the segue to the next strategy and work plan. But looking at the other priority areas, I would be surprised if we would be ready with them still in this cycle. First thing, and the second is that they were not, the private equity and technology were not included in the current strategy and work plan. We needed to be agile and respond fast and quickly and boldly. While this was not planned, so this has been requiring a permanent reorganization of resources. So I think that we have in front of us something that tells you already a little bit about what probably, at least partially, the next strategy and work plan is going to be, but I cannot anticipate that. Let me just add something. We still have some projects in the current strategy and work plan, 24-27, that we have not initiated, and Philippe will have heard the discussion that we had also about that, and there was kind of an agreement that we cannot do everything that it's there in the strategy and work plan, so we will need to make choices as well, probably pick one of those remaining ones and see what to do with the next ones, because we will need to assess if there is still a need to move with them, or if there are other priorities that we need to to choose instead of those remaining projects in the current strategy general plan. It's still early days to say anything about it. I see that.
Thanks, Gabriela. I
Mark?
see Mark's hand is up again.
Yeah, just to come back on that, I mean, I fully agree that, you know, the strategy and work plan, it can't be sort of cast in stone, and you have to review it. I get that, because priorities do change. But I was a bit concerned about CIVs, but I'd like to come back to the question that I asked about the firm culture and governance and private equity. I mean, has any consideration been given at board level to combine these two projects? Because they are, you might also almost argue that firm culture and governance can't be completed without consideration of private equity investment in firms. And so has any consideration been given of combining the two? And if not, you know, why not, basically?
Well, Mark, thank you very much for that question. To your question, if some consideration has been given to that possibility, yes, since the start, I would say. Since the very first moment where we started discussing private equity, that possibility came as a significant and unavoidable one, because it's obvious. Now, the decision that we made not to combine the two projects was that we had a lot of information already and convictions and data and evidence on FCG. It was very early days on private equity, and we were afraid that combining two projects at completely different level of knowledge, research, etc., might result in none of them advancing. At the same time, private equity was literally exploding, and all the attentions were directed to private equity, and we might lose something on the firm culture and governance side if we were to focus all the attention on that side. Thirdly, it's probably an operational reason, but operational reasons sometimes matter. We did not feel, and we don't feel yet, that we have that we are at a point where both projects can be combined. But Mark, we made a decision in March, last March, when we decided to start a standard setting project or whatever. I mean, standard setting, broad sense. We don't know what this is going to be. A project on private equity, do the research, the fact finding, all of these things that we need to do. We also made a decision to make the two projects work together as close as possible in a very coordinated way. And we even appointed one board member to be a board member for the two groups and ensure the liaison, the coordination, etc. I wouldn't be surprised that if at some point in the near future they will merge or combine or meet at some point, but we need for now to be absolutely sure about things that we still need to know, namely on the private equity side, where not everything has been seen, and we need to be sure about everything. So this has been given some consideration. From time to time, it comes to the table again as a possibility. Nobody refuses it as a possible outcome. A bit too early to make that decision. The commitment is to make it work very coordinatedly, namely through common board members working on both projects, if that responds to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
thank
So
you for
possibly something for the next strategic work plan to combine them, maybe.
If not before, let's see, because we need to move with these two projects to until a moment where we can reconsider and say yes or no, we are going to, and it can be before the next strategy.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So, Chair, can we move to the
Thanks,
next
Gabriela.
topic?
I think we can move. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can we move to the next slide, please? And the next one. So, for the next slides, I will just give you a little bit of an update of where we are with respect to each one of the projects. But just to explain these slides and the option that we made in terms of presentation, the PIOB has been urging recurrently the IASB to clearly state the problems that we are trying to respond and the public interest objectives that we are trying to pursue. And what are we doing to connect one with the other? That's a very good request, and it was a very good challenge because it has been forcing us, in the good sense, to be more deliberate, to structure and formulate, articulate the reason for the project and the objectives that we are pursuing in the context of the public interest. So we decided to put it up front so that if the PIB has any comments, it would be interesting to discuss or to get your insights, but so that we all know about what we are speaking about and why we are doing what we are doing. So I'm not going to read the slides. I'll take them as read, but I think that the problem statement for the private equity investment project is very clear. Some new, enhanced, increased, whatever ethical challenges posed by the private equity investments. The need for the ESBA to ensure that there will be the right, the necessary guardrails in place to ensure that all the respect for the ethics and independence principles and provisions is kept in despite the investment from private equity entities. And for that purpose, we are trying to identify those risks, test them against the existing framework, and understand if there is anything needed on our side, be it new standards, narrow scope amendments, just guidance, whatever. We are starting this journey with a blank sheet of paper in our mind, like completely open to whatever we are going to find and conclude. Next slide, please. So very briefly, again, in June we decided we approved the terms of reference for this new work stream. Project for this new work stream. The objective is to information gathering, research, all these things, and the objectives are clear to determine whether emerging ownership and investment models will trigger new ethics or enhanced ethics risks. The idea is that no later than March 2027, we are going to have a report with recommendations to the board. Mark, to your comment, is it too slow? Well, we have been having discussions, and Philippe probably told you about it, because there is some push, some pressure, not only from outside, from our stakeholders, but even from some board members to make this move faster and to have something earlier than March 2027. We don't want to commit with a date earlier than March 2027 because this is going to be a very demanding project, but we are keeping it open, the possibility of having something earlier than that, which means by December or something like that. I would just like to recall the PIOB that, as I said, this was not in our strategy and work plan. There were no resources at all, and we needed to get the resources here and there to start doing this job, this work. So we are going to do the best that we can to accelerate this project. No later than 2027, there will be recommendations. Hopefully, we'll be able to do something earlier than that. The scope of the work, I'm not going to go into details. We can respond to questions, but this is really about already identified areas of ethics and independence, which may be subject to some threats or some risks resulting from private equity and other kind of external private investments. Next slide, please. Also, sorry, can you go back to the last to the other slide? So one thing that I missed to mention is that this is going to be done in coordination with ISSB with respect to the matters that may affect audit quality and quality management. We are already speaking about how this is going to be done. There were some questions about how much this can also impact ISSB work. So there will be coordination measures and initiatives in place to ensure that this will be done coordinatedly. Next slide, please. Well, this is the action plan and no details at all. If you have any question about it, of course, this is the plan that we have in terms of moving forward. As I said, we'll try to be faster than this. We just don't want to commit. Chair, do you want me to stop here or to move to the next slides and take the questions on the other projects as well? How do you prefer to manage it?
I don't see any hands up at this point, Gabriela. I think let's continue and we'll pause if there are hands. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Chair. Can we move to the next slide, please? And here I'm going to give the floor, hand over to Ken, and Ken will present the next slides on technology, please. Ken?
Thank you very much, Gabriela, and hello, everyone. Yes, so on technology, our board has been very busy already over the past quarters, really focusing our efforts and prioritizing our activities on technology. The problem statement is, as you can read it, there are clear issues that we know when it comes to technology, simply because of the very comprehensive and far-reaching transformations that are taking place in practice as well as in business when it comes to the accountancy profession, in terms of the adoption, the operationalization, the implementation of technology-related tools, in particular artificial intelligence. And these transformations, these developments are giving rise to a number of questions around transparency, accountability, and the impact on compliance with the fundamental principles, including confidentiality, as we know. So that is really what we are trying to focus on. In terms of public interest objectives, clearly we want professional accountants to really be clear-minded as to how they look at the implementation of technology-related tools as they embark on and carry on their professional activities or deliver their services, and really focus on a responsible use of technology, being fully accountable. We talk always about the importance of the human oversight, the human in the loop, being very clear as to how they exercise professional judgment, because there are a number of risks, a number of threats around the exercise of appropriate professional judgment when it comes to technology, and really making sure that the use of technology and the use of technology outputs is fit for purpose and appropriate for the intended use. And that's an overarching principle that already is in the code. In terms of actions and responses, really we're taking a three-legged or three-pillared approach. One is really making sure that the code is fit for purpose. Secondly, conducting continuous horizon scanning. And thirdly, supporting awareness, adoption, and implementation. So broadly speaking, what do these mean in terms of the pillars? First of all, a code fit for purpose. It's important to really be aware that our board already back in 2023 issued comprehensive revisions to the code addressing technology. And these revisions have come into effect already in December 2024. They are principles-based, they are intended to be enduring and able to withstand the pace of change. So that is really what's already in the code. There are extensive principles-based revisions. A bit beyond those revisions, we are really keeping really an open eye as to what is happening out in practice. And for that purpose, we have been really working very closely with our technology experts group. And we are engaging with them on a quarterly basis, really monitoring what sort of emerging developments they are seeing in practice and what is it that they are learning that they can share with us. And through that mechanism, we are also keeping tabs, not just in terms of awareness about developments in technology, but also what questions might arise in terms of the continued robustness of the code from a standard setting perspective. So that is really a channel for us to really monitor what is happening and whether the code continues to be fit for purpose. And thirdly, through that continuous horizon scanning, we are maintaining close coordination with IWSP. And that takes me to really the third pillar, which is about awareness raising. And that is critical because the technology... Yes.
Just a second. I see Dave's hand is up. Maybe
okay, sure.
You're going to move on before he asks what he wanted to ask.
Absolutely.
Chair, I actually have a question back on the private equity investment. So I think we should go ahead and do this and come back to me when it's convenient. Thank you.
No problem. Ken, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chego. Yeah, so just in terms of awareness raising, it's critically important that we raise awareness about what IESPA has already done from a standard setting perspective. So we're very much focused on this. Just on the next slide, if you can move to that next slide, I'll just share a few comments on the action plan here. In terms of awareness raising, we are really utilizing the vehicle of non-authoritative material to raise awareness about some of the key provisions that we have embedded in the code to address a number of the important issues that we are focused on, the issues of transparency, accountability, compliance with the fundamental principles, etc., in the context of developments, particularly related to AI. So we have essentially two types of NAM that we are targeting for release within this year. One is an overarching NAM that is being finalized as we speak, and we are anticipating issuing it next week. And the second one is going to be more targeted, a piece of non-authoritative material that will be more focused on artificial intelligence and agentic AI, potentially dealing with case studies, etc. So that one is targeted for finalization in the fourth quarter this year. And beyond this, we're going to be looking at revising the extensive suite of guidance for leadership that we already have and making sure that is updated to the latest developments. And in addition to this, we continue to really keep our board apprised of the latest developments, really raising our awareness internally and providing educational sessions, etc. And as I mentioned, we continue to coordinate very closely with IWSP. So I'll stop here, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ken. I will go back to Dave for his private equity investment question, and then I'll take Tom thereafter. Dave?
Thank you, Chair, and please accept my apologies for taking us a step backwards here. But Gabriela, with respect to private equity, I know part of my concern has been not only the proliferation of the transactions that have been going on over the last several years, but also the lack of transparency in terms of what's behind those transactions. And I guess part of my question is, are you getting cooperation from firms that are entering into these agreements such that you're able to really identify the threats as they really exist because of the nature of the agreements that are being entered into, as opposed to, I mean, I could, come up with potential threats, but they may or may not be threats given the way these transactions are structured. So I just wonder how you're going to, do you feel comfortable about your ability to get information so that you can adequately identify the threats that ought to be addressed?
That's a very good question, Jaif. That's what we are starting to do. It's to try to get that information, those insights, and etc. A difficult part of the project in this respect will be exactly to try to get the firms themselves to explain the challenges or the changes that are undergoing when they are subject to this kind of investments. And it's uncertain. I must speak. I mean, I will ask Ken, because Ken is the one now on the field, trying to start doing the job. But it's unclear that we will be able to get all the information in a very transparent way that we need, also because sometimes there may be some invisible reasons for them not to be completely transparent. We have been through some experiences not directly related to the research that we are doing, but some behavior from some of these firms in terms of transparency and things like that, which at least suggests that we be careful and cautious about the information that we get this way. But I think it's the most that I can say for now. We will for sure target in the sense that try to approach the firms who have been subject to private equity and probably the partners and things like that. What we will be able to see this way we'll see. I cannot anticipate yet. But I don't know if Ken wants to add something, if there is any experience that you have already had in that respect that may be useful.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. And briefly, we have had conversations with at least one firm, for example, Grant Thornton in the US. They've explained to us how they have, at least at a high level, because we've not had an opportunity to go, and they've not obviously shared any private details around the contractual arrangements, etc., with the private equity investors. But the message we keep hearing from them is, look, we're on top of it. We are very aware of our obligations under the code and about the importance of really making sure that we comply with independence requirements in particular. There is a level of concerns, I think, to be honest, there is a level of concern amongst the firms about complications arising from the transactions and the restructuring of the firms themselves, especially if they split between an audit firm and a non-audit firm, legally speaking, and whether that might create some unintended consequences relative to compliance with independence requirements. So that's what they're concerned about. And of course, we are concerned as well, really to focus on the substance of the transactions as opposed to the form. So that's, in fact, we're going to be pursuing some further information gathering to really understand the different arrangements that are being undertaken and to understand what these mean from a code compliance perspective. But that's, just to reiterate, the message we keep hearing from the firms is we are aware of our obligations. We know that we have to really make sure that the private equity investors don't dominate essentially our management and how we set our strategy, etc. But clearly, we are going into this with open eyes and with a lot of skepticism, which is fair to say, because we know precisely what the private equity investors are in those kinds of transactions, and it's not really just for purposes of helping the firms grow their businesses, but there is also, an element of self-interest, if you will, from the private equity investors.
Thanks, Ken and Gabriel. And I guess on that last point, I know that in the forums I've been in, one of the risks that was coming out was really considerations around the exit strategy and whether we are, as IASBA, also looking into that as part of that overall consideration of this particular element.
Yes, of course, Chair. The fact is that there are not that many situations until now, to which we can look at. So we are, of course, this from the start, since we issued the staff alert, it was clear that there was something that we were not covering yet, but that was coming. But for us to be able to assess, of course, we have to have some evidence. And the cases of private equity investment firms exiting are not that many so far, or at least that we haven't seen. But yes, this is of course on our radar, and we can maybe even anticipate some possible consequences or risks even before that materializes. So the response is yes.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I'd like to ask a little bit about the due process on the NAM issue, because we did have quite a lot of discussion on this in terms of the development in the IWSB side. But what I would like to ask is that what was the due process discussion in the IASBA when developing the NAM, especially on the technology side, because the IWSB hasn't sort of the framework for activities, and there is some sort of discussion. It's on sort of the this framework for discussion for the due process. But I understand there is not sort of the platform you don't have in IASBA. So how did you manage to find the right balance between the promptness and the due process obligation in terms of developing NAM, and what is the discussion in the ESPA side for, especially the involvement of the board level discussion might be critical for developing this NAM. So could you share with us what was the discussion on the due process in terms of the development of the technology NAM? Thank you.
Well, what I can say, and then again, looking to Ken, if he can add something. What I can say, Tom, is that we have been navigating this NAM due process or process a little bit in a, I would say, intuitive manner. But what we have been doing is that first, making sure that the board is at all times not only aware but participating, contributing. So none of these NAM pieces that we are about to issue or will issue in the future will be out unless it's, even if it's a staff product, it will always be seen by the board, but the board is contributing. Right now, as we speak, Tom, we are receiving comments on this piece that will go out probably next week from some board members, some fatal flaw comments, but this was subject to discussion with the board. The decision to issue the NAM, the high level structure, topics, approach in the second phase, third phase, a draft piece of the NAM. So the board was 100% involved in the development of this NAM from scratch until the very last moment with fatal flaw comments. With respect to engagement with the external stakeholders, we have, as you know, an expert group on technology, and the expert group has been always involved in the development of everything we do. They are consulted, they receive the materials for comments, they make proposals, and this all is being done in coordination also with IWSP. Yesterday we were receiving comments still on the piece from IWSP. So we are ensuring that not only external feedback is received and suggestions, but also that the internal process goes with full transparency and contribution, collaboration, etc. Ken, do you want to add anything?
I think you said it really, Gabriela. We had a full board discussion in June, just this past June, on the draft overarching NAM. Tom and Philippe can attest to that. And as Gabriela said, the revised version has been circulated also for fatal flaw review from our board, and we have been receiving some comments in that regard. So we are working towards finalizing the document, again, with full board involvement, so to speak. As well as with our technology experts group. They have been engaged in that process as well. We have collected input from them. And also, as Gabriela says, we have also received input from IWSP. So this has been all around, I think, a very thorough process, at least from a due process perspective.
Thank you very much. And then, because as a whole, PIOB would like to discuss about the due process handbook. So this discussion might continue for the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ken and Gabriela. I note we're left with 15 minutes for Gabriela's presentation. Yeah. Maybe we want to move on to allow for more conversations on other areas.
Sure. So can we move to the next slides? So the next part is on firm culture and governance. I don't think that I need to repeat what the problem is and to articulate the problem and the public interest objectives. We have been through this significant number of times over the last 2 years and a half. So I'll please ask to move to the next slide. And the next slide, the purpose of this slide is mostly to recall or to remind what we have been through over the last 2 years and a half, 24, 25, 26, and different phases of the project. It has been 2 years and a half since we started this. The amount, nature, quality, intensity, and depth of outreach and engagement with stakeholders has been unique, unprecedented. So this is really a new world. not only in terms of the intensity and the number of meetings that stakeholders consulted, but also the instruments that we used for the purpose with the focus groups, with the simulations, with the viewpoints before an exposure draft. All this means something that we have been doing before an exposure draft. So, and this is, I think that this is relevant. This reveals how much we have been keeping attentive to what stakeholders say, the need to have full information, feedback, and etc. before we were to make a decision about what to do with the project. So next slide, please. So the next slide, it's like a summary of what we have in terms of evidence, what we have gathered from the dialogues over the last few months. Of course, these last few months cannot separate from what we have heard and done before. It's not an isolated phase of the project, but it's a phase where the stakeholders at least could start seeing a little bit what we had in mind, what was the possible direction of the project, and etc. And we wanted to test it with stakeholders before making a decision. Again, not going to go into details. There was a big discussion about in the code, outside the code, with different positions, users and investors fully aligned and agreed, and very intense in the suggestion and request that this is gonna go into the code. Firms on the opposite side, regulators with mixed views. Some of them saying we need this to be enforced by all means. We need this to be in the code. It's not going to be strong enough and meaningful enough if it's not in the code. Others careful about enforcement considerations and things like that. So we heard all that you can imagine. We tried to distill all that we have heard. And I guess that the discussion that we had at the board on June, and that Philippe had the opportunity to attend and observe during one full day, speaks by itself about amount and quality of information that we gathered and that we provided to the board to make the board able to make a decision. Where are we now? Next slide, please. So in June, we decided, after very careful consideration of the wide range and the diversity of views, proposals, suggestions, etc., and the IESBA public interest mandate, not less important, to develop, evolve in this project by drafting, preparing a high-level principles-based overarching single requirement in the code, and then some targeted application material also in the code. For clarity, the requirement is a requirement, so it's mandatory, but the decision was to make it as high-level principles-based overarching as possible. The application material is not mandatory, of course. Being in the code, it has some authority, but it's not legal or mandatory authority. It is just application material, and this will be combined with a significant amount of guidance outside the code, non-authoritative material, cases, etc., that will be developed in parallel with the development of this requirement and this application material. The objective, this is being done again since a long time ago in coordination with the IWSB. The PIOB has been following this from very close, so I don't need to say the much that we have done together to make sure that this is consistent, coherent, and complementary as it is aimed to be. And we also have in mind the call from the PIOB to at some point explain how the Firm Culture and Governance Framework will work together with ISQM1. This is going to be on our radar and subject to our work, but we need to develop a little bit further the requirement, the application material, and the guidance to be able to be more concrete about this, how this works together. So the action plan, next slide, is that in December, we will have an exposure draft for consultation. Of course, the simplicity of the requirement that we are aiming to draft and the application material, etc., might allow an earlier consultation, but we really need to be, on the one hand, careful. And the shorter and sharper you want to be, the more the words and the drafting matter. So we need to be very careful. And of course, there will be still some engagement with stakeholders. By that time, there will be an exposure draft, and then stakeholders will have the opportunity, like in any other project, to state their considerations, their opinions, their comments, etc. And I'll stop here.
Thanks, Gabriela. Maybe before I allow Felipe and Tom to come in, just on that last point, on the last slide, where you were talking about the call from PLB to really distill this myth of the Firm Culture and Governance Project versus the ISQ1 issues. What are we really planning to do to address, I think, this pain point? Is there a question of we are really going to try and clarify the differences between the two so that it's better articulated and understood by the profession, or what is the plan? That would be my question. Then Felipe, you are free to come in, and then Tom.
Thank you. My remark and question is complementary to yours, Chego. Tell me if I'm wrong, Gabriela, but I understood during this conversation on FCG at the last board that in September it will be proposed drafting or different versions of drafting of the key sentence to be included in the requirement. And that would be an opportunity for you, because I know that you prefer consensus rather than division in the board, but it would be an opportunity to rediscuss and represent some explanations and arguments and so on to improve the consensus within the board to avoid this 6 against 10 opposition. So is it still in your intention? Because I think that can be a key step of strategy to try to have a satisfactory result in terms of adhesion of the board.
Thanks, Philip. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. My question is also very complimentary as well. Coming back to the previous presentation, page 15, perhaps, you mentioned that the regulators' views are not a little bit earlier, one page before. Yes, regulators are some support and some against, so their views are a little bit mixed. And what is your plan for the further engagement with the regulator side? Because I know that their views might be mixed, and perhaps they would like to know a little bit more about the relationship with perhaps the ISQM1 and what service is covered by the ISQM1 and what services are not covered by ISQM1. And one point I'm a little bit more curious is what evidence we would like to, that's the PIOB and the ESBA should prepare for moving this discussion forward. What type of evidence do you need, or we should collect to have a little bit more evidence-based discussion? So, any plan for the engagement with the regulators, and what type of evidence are you prepared for to analyze a little bit further? Thank you.
So,
over to you, Gabriela.
Thank you very much, Chair. Conscious of time, I'll try to respond all the questions. To your question, Chego, what's the plan? So with respect to the differences between FCG and ISQM1, we already have a document that was developed together with IWSP, which I think very clearly demonstrates the differences and the connections, the links as well, between the two areas or the two frameworks or whatever you want to call it. Of course, we were comparing apples to oranges because ISQM1 is standard and what we were comparing with just the viewpoints. It will depend on how these viewpoints will evolve. There is work to be done. We cannot anticipate the fight where we will land. So the approach to this NAM or guidance about how to make FCG and ISQM1 work together, this will very much depend on where we will land. But we will not wait for the end, to the end of the work, because this is already being envisaged. The idea is that listening to stakeholders and depending on the evolution of the project, we will have something that will leave no doubt about where does ISQM1 apply, where does FCG apply, and how they can apply in a combined, complementary, whatever way. So to the point of Philip, a very important question. Yes, you got me. I prefer consensus rather than split views around the board. And of course, I hope that these 6 months will allow us to mitigate at least that divergence. But there is something that I need to say. The 6 versus 10 were 6 versus 10 around one option that we decided to split in two. And for the, I don't know if the PIOB is aware of how we put 5 options open for discussion. We landed in one option, which is divided into alternatives. One, the one that I presented, which is the one that has been approved or agreed. The other, which is the same option, but where the requirement does not exist. It's only application material. The requirement would be also application material. So the level of authority would be lower than the one that was agreed by the board. So the two positions are not that far one from the other, and I'm very confident that we can navigate this in a very effective and relatively smooth way to land in a place where at least more members can agree upon and are able to get an agreement. Once there will be a clear requirement and clear application material, we will see how the board members will see this, and if we can slowly or as fast as possible get an agreement around one position. So this is not the end of the road. We are still deciding what to do in an exposure draft. So this is not the end. This is the start of a journey, and I'm confident that we can in a very fair and honest way evolve towards, I don't know if consensus, but at least less split views. And thirdly, Tom, to your question about what kind of evidence do we need to see how ISQM1 and FCG can work together, I think it's your question. Well, my first response is that we already have a lot of evidence, because these 2 years and a half and all the information that we have been able to manage together, it's already very helpful in that respect. And if we look at the scope of ISQM1 and the scope of FCG and the objectives that they attempt to achieve, I think that we are in a good path to have a response to your question. Still, there is work to be done. Definitely, there is work to be done. Your question about how do we want, I think it was your question, to approach stakeholders to gather more evidence. On the one hand, it is clear that we will need to do that. For the time being, we will try to be a little bit calmer, in a drafting mode towards the exposure draft, and be after all this engagement, we cannot keep this pace of engagement. There is a lot of stakeholder fatigue and etc. So we need to pause a little bit and do the desk job, the desk work. Still, more engagement will be needed. And once we have something more concrete, then we will go and look for the evidence that we need to say, okay, here you apply FCG, there you apply SQM1, or they apply together in a combined manner, which is going to be probably a very frequent way, but without any kind of overlap, contradictions, or whatever. I think that's the most that I can say by now, Tom, because we are not yet there. But all these questions will, of course, inform the way forward as we move to this next phase, where we will clearly need to address the question: how do these two frameworks work together in practice for the firms and for the regulators as well? I think that there was a question on the regulators from you as well, but I don't know if there's anything that you want me to say. The views are a little bit split for different reasons. The reasons why the regulators, some of them would prefer it not to have it in the code, is not exactly the same reasons of the firms. Some of regulators are very intense in their request for this to be in the code, and probably that was not that explicit in some points of in some elements, but we have the evidence of that as well. So split views. So any can I?
Yeah, thanks, Gabriela. I guess on this particular segment of your presentation, I think it's very important to keep, I think, joining all dots together, particularly circling back to what we're really trying to solve versus where we are and what the issues are which are coming. I think that constant reinforcing is important, and to provide the clarity to all the questions that are coming, or the inconsistencies and the disagreements that we are seeing coming out in what you've presented. But nonetheless, I don't think anyone is questioning the what. Perhaps it's the how, where people are having differences of opinions. But let's, I think, see how the board then deals with the pathway going forward. But I want to just encourage ISPA to keep going back to the what are we solving for problem at every occasion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So I don't know, Chigo, we still have 2 slides, a very brief update on the two projects that we are, well, the CFO and sustainability. But if you prefer just to stop here, of course, I think that the slides.
The slides are already up. I think just address them quickly. I know we're 3 minutes over time.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Ken. I'm going to ask Ken to address these 2 slides in 1 minute or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gabriel. Literally 1 minute, yes. So, and Gabriel, you've already touched on the Part 4B and CFOs at the very early, at the beginning of this conversation. So on the Part 4B, essentially, we are taking a pause on this one in light of the information gathering that we have undertaken. Really, the landscape is very, very fragmented. It's very uncertain in terms of how jurisdictions, by and large, are moving forward relative to sustainability reporting and assurance. There are numerous voluntary engagements that are certainly being performed in the area of sustainability that are utilizing different reporting frameworks that we know, not just general purpose frameworks, but special purpose frameworks as well. And there are the non-PA practitioners as well that we know are very active and that are using standards issued by ISO and not assurance standards issued by IWSP and by extension the code as well. So it's a very varied landscape, and the information that we've been able to glean has been essentially far in between in terms of consistency, in terms of depth, etc. So I think it's fair to say it's better to wait until the dust settles on basically the adoption of the ESA when it comes to mandatory reporting and assurance, and see how practitioners are really adopting the ESA and by extension as well ESA 5000, and then come back to that topic in the future. So that's really where we're on Part 4B sustainability. On the CFO work stream, as the PIB knows, there's been extensive work already done on this one, and the board, our board has had the benefit of a comprehensive report back in June at our June board meeting. And essentially the upshot is, look, we don't feel from the information that we gathered that stakeholders are telling us there are gaps in the code or there are issues that the code doesn't address from an ethical perspective when it comes to the conduct of PAIBs who are operating in the CFO role. That said, there is a clear need for awareness raising and a clear need for implementation support. And that's really where the focus is going to be in terms of a go forward strategy. And we will see what our project team comes forward with in terms of a final report and recommendation at our September board meeting. So that's really where we are on the CFOs.
Thanks, Ken. I guess this underpins the sort of overarching comments that Gabriela opened with in that first slide, to say this is where we are. We are now prioritizing other things. So thanks for that. Right, thank you, Gabriela and Ken, for your submission. I think now we can move on. I know I'm well aware that some of us have been sitting from 2 o'clock. It's now 5 o'clock. I am well aware that the break was intended after the session that we're about to go to. So let's continue, and then hopefully we'll have a quick break comfort break before we go to the rest of the agenda. Unless board members can show me by thumbs up or thumbs down whether we should have the break now and then continue after. But I'm well aware that we've been sitting since 2 o'clock, so it's almost 3 hours of sitting, some of us. We were taking a bit of a break, waiting for the live stream to come back on as we're still in the public session. Right, so in terms of now the program, I think we're moving on to the joint, the public session where we are going now to item 10, which is the approval of the minutes, the public minutes for the last technical committee meeting, the 86th minute, and then the Secretary General also want to flag the calendar, and then the quarterly timetable. May I just, by show of hand or in terms of thumbs up, see whether board members do approve those public minutes that are identified under agenda 10.1? Thank you,
Yes.
Tom. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Han. And of course, myself. Philip? I think we're missing Philip, or he's not on my screen somewhat.
Yeah, I think he didn't make it back.
Not yet. Do we form the majority to pass the minutes, Secretary General? I assume we do for the technical committee.
I assume we do, and if we have any edits, minor edits from Philly, we'll draw those to attention, but otherwise we'll consider these approved.
Noted. So shall we move to 10.2 then, which is the calendar for noting, Secretary General?
Thank you, Seko, and really this we can be very brief. There's only one update to the 2026 calendar, which I'll mention in a moment. But first, let me just say for the public record and anyone who's following these sessions, either live or with the recording, that are two observers for the SSB meetings in September are Tom Furusawa for IESPA, which will meet in Madrid at the capital markets regulator, the Spanish CNMV, who are kindly hosting the meeting. Thank you, Tom. And Mark Smith, who will observe the IASB meeting in New York. Thank you, Mark. And the addition to the 2026 calendar is following the confirmation from Gabriela and your team that you will have a mid-quarter call in October. I think it's now confirmed the 29th. That Tom Furusawa will be our observer of that, so we'll confirm to your team. Thank you, Chair. That's all I wanted to draw attention to at this stage on the 2026 calendar.
Thank you, SG. And then in terms of, you've already covered it, the 10.3?
Really just for noting that we have received and are thankful for the SSB team and James, who generally sends this through to us. We've noted the quarterly calendar, the quarterly timetable, and that is totally in line with our understanding going forward. So thank you for that. It looks to be up to date and all in order.
Thank you, Secretary General. I guess then this marks the end of the public session. Indeed, we were in a hurry to take a break. We should have just done these two before the break, but nonetheless, that's fine. So we will be bidding our live streaming session goodbye and those people online, and then move on to the private session with the standard setting board chairs for the joint session.